Assalamu alaikum. Today I'm going to continue the discussion on uncertainty and addiction and look at what are the steps you can take in order to reduce the uh, any level of uncertainty that you have or addiction that you have. So, in order to recap what we went through last time in my last session, 1 out of 4 Australians at this point in time will be suffering from anxiety or depression. Out of that, 2.5 out of 4 of us will at one point will have experienced either anxiety or depression. Now, the key to understanding both anxiety and depression and a lot of our mental health issues is to understand dopamine and our threshold called delta force B. Just to recap quickly, dopamine is produced. It's our accelerator when we're chasing something or awaiting something, whether good or bad. We produce dopamine, and when we produce dopamine, we produce a chemical called delta force B, which is basically our accelerator. So to think about an example, um, if you're waiting for something from online shopping, a really simple example, and you're eagerly awaiting for it, and you're very, I would say, either addicted to online shopping or close to it, you'll set your delta force B at a certain level, your threshold. The moment the gift arrives, your dopamine levels will go down, and your basically that high that you had waiting for that gift, the online present that you were waiting for, it'll come down. So, and serotonin will be produced when you've got it. Now, why is this important? Is that when our delta force B threshold is set too high, we become addicted. So, like I said in my last session, if you're addicted, then that could lead to stress, and most likely will. And if you're living a very stressful life, it's much more easier for you to become addicted. So, um, that's what I'm going to have a look at today to see what steps we can take to reduce this threshold level. But a real quick discussion also on the fact that when our delta force B levels, our thresholds, because we're addicted, are set too high, they lead to depression and anxiety. The reason for this is this: when our delta force B levels are too high, we place too high a value on any perceived risk or threat. And I use the word there, perceived, not real, but perceived. I'll give you a simple example. You see a guy waiting at a bus stop outside your house at 8 a.m. in the morning, very normal. Next day, you see the same guy waiting to catch the bus at 8 a.m. in the morning, again, very normal. But if your delta force B levels are set very high, you may perceive a threat from that person. Something which most people whose threshold levels are very normal won't. But if it's set high, you will be very likely to be triggered and anxious to any perceived risks or threats. So that's how it leads to anxiety. But it equally leads to depression as well. And the reason for this is this: when our delta force B levels are set too high because of addiction or because of prolonged stress, it sets our expectations too high. So I come again to that example of online shopping, just to help understand. If you're waiting for something on online shopping, you'll at the time that you're waiting, especially if you have to wait a little bit to get it, your delta force B levels will be set high. You're producing dopamine. The moment you get it, it will come down. And that gap between waiting to get it and having your expectations set this high, but the delivery being over here, will mean that it will lead to depression. Now, I've used a really simple example for online shopping, but if you can ratchet that up quite a lot for smoking or drugs or gambling or any of the high level addictions which produce a lot of dopamine and set your threshold really high, I think you get the idea. Equally, if you're living in a real uncertain environment where there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of job, relationship, food on your table, you will also increase your delta force B levels, produce dopamine, and you will be very highly triggered to any perceived threats or risks that may exist. I've been in that environment where the uncertainty level is very high, you react negatively to any perceived risk, or even if it's a very small threat or a perceived one, you react highly to it. So uncertainty has the same effect as well as what addiction to alcohol, gambling, online shopping, and so forth does. Now, you could say to yourself, well, you know what, I'm not addicted to anything, so it doesn't really apply to me. But what you have to realize is that everyone goes through some form of stress one way or another. And when you go through prolonged stress, the impact of your brain producing dopamine and setting the delta Fosby, the threshold level, it's the same impact as addiction. So like I said before, addiction leads to stress, stress leads to addiction. When you are stressed, you're more likely to get addicted. And if you're addicted to one thing, you're more likely to get addicted to another. That's why research indicates that people who, for example, are addicted to smoking get addicted to drugs much more easily. So addiction can flow on to different things very easily. Now, this is where the key becomes to try and bring our delta Fosby levels down. And if I give an example of something that research has indicated, that if you're a single parent, you're twice more likely to be depressed or anxious than a couple with kids. Twice more likely. If you're not in a relationship, you're 1.5 times more likely to be anxious and 2.5 times more likely to be depressed. Similarly, if you're unemployed, you're more likely to be depressed or anxious. So the takeaway that is here is that whether it's stress, uncertainty, or addiction, it can hit you from different angles. So never judge a person if you see someone, if they're addicted, if you see someone on the street doing it hard. It doesn't take a lot for your environment, for your circumstances to change. So always try to help those people. Now, coming back to what is the key to deal with if your delta Fosby levels are too high. These are some of the steps that research indicates are some of the best steps you can take in order to either deal with addiction or uncertainty. So the first step there is you got to acknowledge it. If you're not going to acknowledge it, you're not going to get nowhere. Whether it's uncertainty or whether it's addiction. No one wants to know they're addicted, but if you're not going to acknowledge it, you're not going to get anywhere. That's the first step. Second step is to find the willpower in order to deal with the root cause of either the uncertainty or the addiction, to try and deal with it. Now, the key here is that you gotta have the willpower to want to give up. And an important advice there is that you gotta frame it in a way to yourself where, for example, if you're smoking, you gotta tell yourself, look, if I give up smoking, my health is gonna be better. I'm gonna have more time with my family. I'm going to have better prospects at my job. My long-term health will be better. And I'm going to be saving a lot of money. Overall, it's a win-win. But if you frame yourself by saying, oh, I'm giving up something really good, you're going to find it difficult to find the willpower. So that's step number 2, finding the willpower to do it. Third step is to remove your access to the addiction, or in case of uncertainty, to try and reduce it. Now, for example, if you're addicted to social media, maybe a step to delete that app. Just using an example there. Or if you're another type of addiction, you've got to remove your access to it, or at least reduce it. That will help a lot. Fourth step is to take it a day at a time. If you fail, it's okay. Every time you try, your delta Fosby levels come down. So you can fight it much more better than you did the last time. So don't give up. Keep fighting it. Fifth step, do something productive on which you can focus your attention on. Exercising, boxing, reading, anything, praying, anything that focuses your attention onto something. And the key step there is that you must be focused on this. You must enjoy this. Otherwise it won't last. Sixth step is to help others and spend time with those who can help you improve. Group therapy works really well for something like alcohol, smoking, drugs, but also to surround yourself with good people. If you are struggling with something like gambling and then you go back to the same friends who are gambling, good luck to you. You're going to struggle. And so you have to surround yourself with good people. In the Quran, in Surah 18, verse 28, it says, surround yourself with good people. who have the right values, who are close to God. So it's important to surround ourselves with good people. And last step is don't give up. Keep trying. When you fail, it's okay. You'll get better each time. For me, it wasn't addiction that brought me a lot of stress. It was uncertainty. I had a lot of uncertainty in the last few years, and for me, what I found best was to focus on the Quran. When I was facing a lot of uncertainty, I put a lot of my attention to reading and understanding the Quran, and it made my focus go on to that and reducing my level of uncertainty. What it brought for me was self reflection, looking within me to see how I could improve. Very important. Um, Learning how to control my anger, learning to be thankful for those things you take for granted all the time, like your health, your family's health, a sunset, being able to walk outside. Simple things that we take for granted, but which we should really thank God for. Um, and trusting His decisions, that He has our best interests in heart, even if you don't understand it, trust His wisdom because it works out if you trust Him. So I hope those steps will help you in either to deal with uncertainty and addiction. In the coming videos, inshallah, I intend to look at some of the specific things that people can addicted to and how they can deal with that. Thank you for your time. Assalamu alaikum.